Good morning and welcome back to my channel. For you guys who are new here, this is True Crime and Beauty with Leah. I am Leah and I usually try to upload every Tuesday so you can kind of remember like True Crime Tuesday if you can. If not, that's okay too. Anyways, today is going to be one of those stories that I have, as I went through it, I kind of was like, I just couldn't believe some of the things that I was reading. But then again, I think that's come across every story that I've done so far with this. So let's go ahead and dive on in. This particular murderer inspired multiple characters in multiple different movies and TV shows. He was the inspiration for, of course, my series that I'm going on, a doctor in the asylum. I can't pronounce it. It's Dr. Thredson, something like that. And it was played by the same guy who played Spock in the new Star Treks. Great actor. He's in numerous American Horror Story series as varying characters, but in Asylum he played this particular doctor. And this is who they took inspiration off of for that particular doctor. Also, he is the inspiration to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the character in that. He is also the inspiration for the character in the Silence of the Lambs, the Buffalo Bill character, and also in for Norman Bates in the Bates Motel, or Psycho if you know it by the movie or know it by the TV show. So this guy has actually been used quite frequently as inspiration, which is kind of scary if you think about how dastardly this person was to create such a character or persona that he was used for horror movies. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to be talking about Edward Theodore Gein. Gein. And as always, I'm going to try to go ahead and tell you what I'm using as I'm using it. If you do decide that you want me just to list it down below in the description or list it across the screen when I'm using it, yeah, just go ahead and leave me a comment below or DM me in Instagram if that's what you prefer. Alright, so let's get started. Today I'll be using the Wet n Wild Ultimate Brow. This is very well used. I have multiples of these backups because I actually really love this. It's like $5 and I love this. I've used it, as you can see, I'm fixing to hit pan on yet another one. So Mr. Henry Theodore Gein was born August 27th, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was born to a Miss Augusta Wilhelmine Gein and George Philip. I did not know why his last name is different. So it just says that they were parents. I couldn't find if it said if they were married or not. So we'll just go with, hey, they weren't married because they took their mother's name. But their father's name was George Philip, and he was an alcoholic. Said that his mom was verbally abusive to him. Now, he was the youngest of two children, two boys. His oldest brother was 5 years older than him and born in 1901. His name was Henry George Gein, so he was named after his dad, his middle name. Henry would talk about how he felt like there was an unhealthy relationship between Edward and their mother Augusta, but it was never specified as to why he felt like this. Maybe she just loved him more and showed it, and it pissed off Henry. Not really sure. It just states that Henry would speak out against this and say, like, this was unhealthy and it didn't seem right and all of this stuff. Now remember, Henry was the older brother. So he was born, like I said, he was born in 1901. He was about 5 years older than Ed, or Edward. And Edward idolized his mother. Like, Edward absolutely idolized his mother completely. Despite how abusive she was, verbally abusive, it doesn't say that she was physically abusive, it just says she was verbally abusive. Like, she was super religious, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it was to the extreme. There's a difference between being religious and being to the extreme, and from what my research shows is that she was just to the extreme. He couldn't delve into any vices like sex or alcohol or drugs, which is good. You know, you don't want your kid doing drugs or drinking or anything like that, but she would do it like to excess. I guess maybe she didn't want him to delve into like side dive into what his dad was, because it is said that he was like a raging alcoholic. So I'm sure that maybe that had something to do with it. But there is no real knowledge of that, of her real reasoning behind that. But if you know, let me know in the comments below. This is for entertainment purposes. It's not meant to offend. I'll go ahead and give that clear warning. Also, just a quick little heads up, giving the disclaimer right now that some of it can be kind of graphic and maybe not your cup of tea. If it's not, or you're not in the right headspace to watch something like this, go ahead and click off to something else and catch me in the next video, okay? Your mental health is more important than a video. Thank you guys so much. So let's go ahead and continue. I have my brows on from the Wet n Wild, and we're going to go ahead and set it down with some NYX brow glue. You guys know I reach for this very, 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 very often. I do have other things that I should use, and I'll go ahead and start. I did use the Anastasia Beverly Hills in the previous video. I think it was the previous video. I don't know. I'm losing time here. And I just go back and forth with this, and it really just, it's very convenient to hold the brows down. For our eyelids, we're going to be using the Too Faced Shadow Insurance. According to most, Ed was a victim of a mother who would socially, like, isolate him from everyone. I'm not really sure, like, if this had to do with her, like, religious beliefs and just not wanting him to delve into or, you know, participate into any of the vices. She even had him denounce, you know, seeking out any type of pleasure. And if he did act on these pleasures, these interests, she would actually abuse him for it, probably lock him up, so that he would maybe learn from that. And just that clip right there is very much from like the Bates Motel or Psycho, about the character Norman Bates. Just that little clip, you just knowing, you know, you're gonna notice, you're gonna recognize as I go through this different sections from different movies, and you're gonna be like, oh, that was from that movie, if you're interested in those types of movies, or I'll try to point it out. But yeah, you're gonna notice, like, that's from Chainsaw Massacre, that's from Norman Bates, that's from the Bates Motel, that's from Psycho, that's from American Horror Story Asylum, that's from, you know, Silence of the Lambs. Trust me, you're gonna be able to see every single thing about how this character really did influence those characters on screen. And today we're going to be using the absolutely gorgeous collab that Luis Torres did with Beauty Creations. I've used some of the other products in this, but this is the colors. Can you see them? They're so pretty. I'm going to use I'm going to use some neutrals, and I'm going to use some of the other colors as well. We're just going to have some fun with this, okay, today. So, per Psycho and Norman Bates and the Bates Motel, as the time went on and by the end of her life, Ed did become his mother's caretaker, just like in those movies and those TV shows. Like I had said, that Henry had stood up and said that it was really weird, his relationship with the mother, Edward and Augusta's relationship. He just said it was unhealthy. And I guess maybe because Ed wanted to impress his mom. I'm not really sure if there was like something creepy going on. It really didn't push that envelope there. But they did have a very weird relationship. See, I stop and think about how Carrie's mom was in the movie Carrie. How she was like, very, very hyper religious. That's not like a normal religious person. That's crazy. Okay? That's crazy. So oddly, as life went on, remember the boys were born in 1901 and 1906. In 1944, the family farm set on fire, and Henry was nowhere to be found. Just up and gone. Just could not find him. Edward decided to call the police because he was concerned that he did not find his brother. He couldn't find his brother anywhere. Just couldn't find him. And, the fire was concerning too. So, just call the people to handle all that. Well, interestingly enough, when the cops came out to, handle the fire and look for Henry, Edward was able to lead the officers directly to the body of Henry. That's interesting. Little coincidence there. Just happened to be strolling by and be accidentally like, oh, here's my brother. Yeah, he's dead. Oops. Yeah, I don't really know about that so much. He was just, in the fact that his brother's head had so many bruises on it, it was just like all swelled up. And then the fire on top of it, it didn't look sketchy to anybody. Like, nobody was like, this is a little weird. And the fact that he was like, you and mom have this weird relationship, you need to knock that crap off. Yeah, no, this doesn't seem suspicious at all to me. And despite all of it, the officers were just like, oh, okay, well, it was an accidental death. The bruises all over homeboy's head, and it was an accidental death. We'll go with it. 1944 short. Okay. I think they just didn't feel like searching. After Henry passed away, I did mention that Augusta, the mom, had passed away, but she didn't pass away till after Henry passed away. I just want to make that clear in the timeline. And after she passed away, Edward was distraught. Like, he went from being some type of, like, social distanced person to a straight up hermit. He was not coming out. He didn't just become a hermit. He took, like, her favorite areas of the house, like, they probably had a really big house and a farm and all of that, and he cordoned off these areas, so like memorializing them, even to the point of making them like a shrine or an idol to her, so you couldn't touch it. It was just exactly how she had left it. And so yeah, that again, Psycho, Bates Motel, all of that. The character is known as Norman Bates. That's why I keep referring to these movies or the TV show. But yeah, the character's actual name is Norman Bates. And we're going to go ahead and use 2 of the Smashbox primers. They make great primers. One is for redness, one is for pores. So I'm going to go ahead and do double duty with this. As you can tell, I have some redness. And then I also like to, it's not just pore filling, it also helps to conceal your wrinkles. And it helps to neutralize out. For foundation today, we're going to go ahead and use the Catrice True Skin foundation. I really like this stuff. So with Mama Gein being gone, he was just having a hard time, okay? I feel bad for the guy. You know, he was a hermit his whole life, and because of his mom, and now she's gone, his brother's gone, you know, accidentally and all. And there is no mention of his dad anywhere. Like, I don't know if he just up and bailed out or what, but it doesn't talk about him being around at all. And like I said, remember when I described their names, neither of them had their dad's last name. They had their mom's. So that's what I'm thinking is homeboy just bailed out. And you know, he was a little tortured. Mr. Edward was tortured now, you know. He didn't have nobody to talk to. Probably wishing he hadn't killed his brother, despite his brother's, you know, suspicions or feelings about him and his mom. He was probably thinking, like, man, I really lost out on having a pal during this situation. Because now I don't have nobody. We're going to go ahead and use some color correcting. I know you guys don't see me do this either much, but I actually do this more than I do contouring. And so we're going to take some of the Milani color correcting in, I think this is in Rose. Yeah, this is in Rose. And we're just going to dot it right underneath the eyes just lightly. It doesn't take much. This right here will show a big difference in your actual under eyes. Like I said, Edward was just living his life now, and he was just kind of bummed out, depressed, you know. Not having his brother, not having his mother, and apparently not having his father either. Just that guy just dipped. I still don't know what happened to him. I mean, I know he's not alive anymore, but he just was gone. He bailed out. He was one of those guys. That's what it was. I bet he was a deadbeat dad. Because if the mom had this much influence, oh yeah, I bet that's what it was, and they didn't get the last name. Oh, I know guys like that. Look, any guy can make a baby. Takes a real guy to stick around and raise a baby, okay? Just saying. Not sorry. Not sorry. Not sorry. See how that like nice kind of like blurred out some of my dark circles? And we're going to use some Milani concealer to just kind of add to our little Milani combo here under the eyes. Good part about that is also keeping your under eyes hydrated, because dang, little redness on the corners here. Boop, boop. So after some time went by, and good old Edward, you know, he'd been kind of flying under the radar basically for some time. You know, his mom passed. He was just doing his thing. Well, in 1957, a young woman by the name of Bernice Warden went missing, and she was a like a hardware store owner, probably well known in the town, you know. And she went missing, and it turns out that he was the last one to be seen with her. And that drew the cops' attention to him. So, turns out Mr. Gein was not so fragile and just mourning his mom. No, he was up to some tricks. He was up to some tricks, let me tell you what. To set our stuff today, our makeup today, we're going to go ahead and use some Milani Conceal and Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and set this down. It's really important to set down makeup. And to continue our look, we're going to use some Beauty Creations Pot Color in Indigo and the matching eyeliner in Indigo as well. This woman goes missing, right? Okay, she's missing, and everything leads to Edward. Like, it's like, okay, homeboy did something, and we don't really know what, but he did something. Did end up following him to the farm, and they found the decapitated body of Miss Bernice Warden. Sadly, like, they were looking for her, and he was the last one they saw her with, and now she's there and missing a head. That's not really great. You know, he should have, I don't know, I don't understand people. Little did they know just what Mr. Gein had been up to. He had been going out and having a freaking field day. He had, as they were going through the house, okay, they ended up listing it as Gein's House of Horrors. Of course they did. I feel like that's what I've covered. The Castle of Horrors, the Hotel of Horrors, the, you know, I think something else of horrors. You know, it's just everything starts getting labeled the House of Horrors and all this. As I continue to describe this, you're going to really start to see where Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill comes into play. His House of Horrors, as they call it, was just continuing to unravel as they continued to do their inspection, which most time happens when you're inspecting a murderer's house. It just kind of, you just start seeing more and more where you're like, ooh, they just could have just left it alone. Could have just left and seen what we saw and just kept on moving. But that's not what detectives do. You actually have to go out and you have to find and dig your hands in the stuff that you don't want to do. So, anyhow, as they went through the house, they started finding random bones that did not go to Miss Bernice. You know, they found her body in a graphic state. Okay, well, the graphic state was the fact that she was decapitated. He wasn't just out there, you know, taking people. He was out there doing other things. This is actually in the color Denim, not Indigo, but they are matching, as you can see. During this time, they had known that there was another missing woman out there, and she was a tavern keeper. They ended up finding her in his house in a similar state as the previous victim, and she was, she'd been missing since 1954. Her name was Miss Mary Hogan. He didn't express what happened. He didn't explain as to what happened. He didn't go into detail as to what happened, any of his victims. And this isn't really like he's just saying, you know, hey, I have one victim. No, he had multiple victims, and they're thinking that he had up to 7 victims, but he was really only charged with 2. They couldn't convict him on the others. They didn't have enough evidence to convict him of the other ones, but they did end up getting him on the 2. For eyeliner today, we're going to use these little e.l.f. Liquid eyeliners. Well, they're not liquid eyeliners, they're liquid eyeshadows. Like, they come with the little thing like here, and just dip. What you do is you just dip this in here. It dries down like an eyeliner. You just go ahead and get your brush loaded up like this. If I look at that, I'm going to look straight cross-eyed to you guys, and you guys are going to get a good laugh. And we're going to add a little sparkly from this and just pat it on. Kind of tie the up and the down together. And of course the butter bronzer. So as they were going through his house, they would come across things such as bowls, lamps, lampshades, chairs, tables, things like that were made from human flesh and human bone. There was also found a bunch of masks made out of human skin. Again, very Buffalo Bill, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you see. And not just that, here's the kicker. You wait for it. You're going to be like, bing, 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 Buffalo Bill all the way. They found a suit of skin. They called it the woman's suit. It was a female-looking skin made to be worn. Yeah. So did Silence of the Lambs take that one right out of Mr. Edward Gein's folder of horrors? Yeah, think so, right? Edward Gein says he does not remember the details of any of his murders, which were 2 that he only confessed to. But remember, there are 7 that they think he took part in. And not just that, but he was, ready? A grave robber. Yeah, he was a good old-fashioned body snatcher. And he would rob graves of elderly women who seemed to resemble his mother. Mommy issues, for sure. For our cheeks today, we're going to use California in the Box by Catrice. So, needless to say, Mr. Edward Gein, he was special type. Like, he had some interests in some things that maybe Mommy Dearest wouldn't have approved of. But also probably because his mom had such a strange influence on him and he had that obsession with her. So he was just out there just snatching bodies. I guess dead or alive, it didn't really matter. And would turn them into fixtures around his house. Which part of it was still cordoned off, remember? Because that was his ode to his mom. Ode, O-D-E. Saying that word right. So it said that he robbed up to 9 graves. So he was up to some things in his years after Mama had passed. He'd been quite the busy bee. But the thing is he got so twisted up by his mama that naturally I would think that he was going to have some type of messed up issue. Not everybody who goes through trauma ends up messed up like this kind of messed up, but I mean, trauma does affect people. So you would think like this is going to be a cut and dry case. This guy's like, I don't remember that I did this, but apparently I've crafted some bowls out of bodies, and yeah, they're just displayed around my home, no big deal. And oh, by the way, I made a suit that I can put on anytime I feel like being a lady. I would have thought that maybe this would have been a little bit more cut and dry. We're going to go ahead for highlighter and use some BH Cosmetics Mrs. Bella. Never used it before. Looked pretty. So he is tossed into the insane asylum. Now that fits, okay? It's like, okay, insane asylum, I can be on board with that. I can definitely be on track with that one. Because homie's definitely insane. Like there's no doubt in my mind that there's about 12 screws loose in his brain. We're going to take a pause and go ahead and curl our lashes and put on some Huda Beauty Legit Lashes Mascara. You guys know I love this stuff. So they locked him up and put him in the insane asylum. He went to Central State Hospital. I assume that is in Wisconsin. So you would think that's where our story ended. Well, it actually doesn't, because at one point he was in the insane asylum and they decided that good old Edward was fit for trial. So Edward got out to do trial. Okay? Yep. He's doing a trial. Doesn't matter if he's crazy or not. They're like, he's going to trial. Usually the reason why they say, like, they put people in insane mental hospitals is because they're not fit for trial and they're also a danger to society. But apparently they're like, hey, let's just put him on trial. Okay, well, I mean, if you fail trial, then okay. You would think that if he failed the trial, then he would just go to death or whatever. No. So they put him on trial. Okay. And naturally, we already know what happens. He gets deemed mentally incompetent and insane. Again. It's like, why did we have to do 2 trials to figure out that he was insane and couldn't stand trial? I don't understand. I'm a bit confused. So they tossed his butt back into the insane asylum and said, okay, this is where you're going to live out your life, in the mental institution. They ended up only trying him for 1 murder during the trial, and they only tried him for that 1 murder because of financial reasons. They ended up running out of financial resources, and this is the prosecution. Okay? If you take in somebody's butt to trial, get the funds to take it all the way. Nope. Financial reasons, they only did 1 trial for 1 murder, and he was still not deemed competent to be charged for this. I mean, I guess he was charged for it, but his actual punishment was to be tossed back into the insane asylum. So I don't really understand the point of actually taking him out of the insane asylum to send him to trial, then to have him tossed back into the insane. Why did we have to do all this extra work? And for the lippies today, we're going to use a little Ofra and a little Fenty. So this guy does what he does, but he doesn't admit to saying, he actually says he doesn't know how all these crimes happen, right? So we're just going to go ahead and add the Fenty gloss right over the top of it. Well, as you can guess, he spent the rest of his life in a mental institution in Wisconsin. Mendota Mental Institution. A little Milani setting spray. Found a big bottle of this. I'm so excited. Okay, so to summarize, basically, Edward Gein was the basis of many movies and storylines of kind of spooky horror films because of the fact that he did things like abducted 2 women, possibly 7, with murdered, decapitated them, used skins, bones, things like that to make stuff around the house, lampshades, masks for himself, and also to make chairs and lamps and a woman's suit. These were taken by, so the influence of him, or an inspiration of him, was taken and put into movies and to scare us, which worked, but it's even scarier to think that somebody out there, this was a real person out there and that did these things. He died at 77 years old on July 26th of 1984 in Mendota Mental institution in Madison, Wisconsin. If you enjoyed this video or just enjoyed watching me put on makeup while I rambled off and told you a story, then go ahead and hit the like button. I appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. Also, I hope that you guys return for next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, be kind to one another, take care of yourselves, and have an amazing day. See you next time.